Kurt Busch says he's hopeful to return to NASCAR for the end of the 2022 season, and William Byron and Ty Gibbs have been handed major penalties by NASCAR. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start our paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump into those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Alex Bowman's 2022 Ally Fan Vote scheme they're going to be seeing next in a couple weekends at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. This paint scheme looks really good in my opinion. They had a little bit of a contest for the fans to get involved. This looks really awesome, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Las Vegas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brandon Jones' 2022 Little Hugs Menards scheme they're going to be seeing at this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. Looks great in my opinion. Other than Menards, there's really not much changes, but I think it looks good, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Talladega. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Howie DeSavino III's 2022 Travis Mills Foundation scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. Looks pretty good in my opinion. Looks very solid. Hopefully Howie will have a good run in this car this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jack Wood's 2022 Logitech scheme they're going to be seeing at Homestead Miami Speedway. Looks awesome, in my opinion. Very excited to see that Logitech is stepping up to the plate and sponsoring Jack Wood. It looks good, in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chandler Smith's 2022 iBuyPower scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at Talladega. Looks good. Hopefully he has a good run in this truck, and hopefully Chandler Smith can clinch his way into the championship race. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Timmy Hill's 2022 Coble Buffalo Wild Wings scheme that we're going to be seeing this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. I think it's so phenomenal to see that Timmy Hill's getting sponsored by Buffalo Wild Wings. It's great to see a big partner in funding is stepping up to sponsor, and when you have a company like that sponsoring a smaller driver, I think it's really awesome, and I'm excited to see that they will have Buffalo Wild Wings on the car this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chase Purdy's 2022 Ole Miss Rebel scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. Very solid paint scheme in my opinion. Very excited to see Chase Purdy's being sponsored by his old college. Looks good. Hope he have a good run in this car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Bailey Curry's 2022 Alka-Seltzer scheme, which is a throwback to Terry Labonte's scheme that we're seeing this weekend at Talladega. Love this a lot. Colors match very perfectly to Terry Labonte's old colors. I think it looks really exciting, really creative, and I'm really excited to see it out on the racetrack this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Kevin Harvick's 2022 Busch Light Busch scheme that we're going to be seeing this weekend at Talladega. Much different looking colors in my opinion, but I think it looks really solid. I think did a really good job on it, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Talladega. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is the first 2023 paint scheme, and it's Chris Buescher's 2023 Fifth Third Bank scheme they're going to be seeing throughout the 2023 season. Of course, if you notice, there's a change in the font on the number, but also, I think this looks very similar to last year's scheme. There's a few differences on there, but there's not much different on it. Hopefully next year when Chris Buescher has this car, he does really well. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tyler Reddick's 2022 Realtree scheme that we're going to be seeing this weekend at Talladega. Looks good in my opinion. Not much to say than that. Realtree, of course, a big partner of the RSR family. Excited to see that they're back on the car. Hopefully he'll have a good run in this car and goes back-to-back this weekend at Talladega. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Jeff Gluck poll from this past weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. As according to this poll he does every single week, which we haven't talked about on the channel here as of recently, according to this poll, he got a 13.4% of people that said yes. This is the second lowest rated poll in Jeff Gluck history, only behind the All-Star race at Texas earlier this year. It isn't a surprise of how big of a debacle the race was and how the race really wasn't that great. I'm not shocked or surprised that only that many people basically said yes. I'm not surprised and shocked by that, and that is a Jeff Gluck poll. Again, I'm not very shocked and not surprised to see that that number is really low. Not majorly shocked by that, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jason White. As Jason White is going to drive the 33 Ferran Brothers Racing this weekend at Talladega. I believe this is the Canadian Jason White, by the way. Jason White has made many starts in ARCA and the Camping World Truck Series. He will basically be able to make the show, as I think everyone will make the show for the Truck Series this weekend. Wishing the best to Jason White. The truck's got enough owners points to make the show. Hopefully Jason will have an opportunity to make the show this weekend. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Johnny Sauter. As Johnny Sauter is going to drive the 13th for ThorSport Racing this weekend at Talladega. I believe this will be Johnny Sauter's 4th or 5th start in the 13th truck this weekend. He has not made a lot of starts this year in trucks as he's been running only part-time. He's been focusing on spending time with his family and racing late models as well. Wishing the best for Johnny Sauter this weekend, and I think he'll be a contender to win. I think he's won here at Talladega in the past and on other super speedway tracks, so I do think he is going to be a threat this weekend at Talladega. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Parker Retslap. As Parker Retslap is going to drive the 20 for Young's Motorsports this weekend at Talladega. I believe this is going to be Parker's first ever NASCAR Camping World Truck Series start. Parker's a very talented driver who's completed in Roush Fenway's NASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series team. And Parker, great to see he's getting more opportunities of more organizations. It's good to see a driver like him get opportunities because I think Parker absolutely deserves opportunities. Wish it was on better racetracks than his trucks. I think he can really show his talent. But Parker's a good driver, and I think he'll have a good run in this truck this weekend at Talladega. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mike Harmon. As Mike Harmon is officially making his return to NASCAR this weekend at Talladega. And guess what? He's going to be able to race this weekend as we'll talk about some withdrawals here in the not-so-distant future of this episode. Really glad Mark Harmon's back. We'll see if he has any issues at Applebee's this time around. But really happy to see Mike Harmon's back. It's great to see he's in the show, and he'll be able to race this weekend at Talladega. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Derek Griffith. As Derek Griffith is going to drive the 26th for Sam Hunt Racing this weekend at Talladega. Derek Griffith, who's made select starts so far this year for Sam Hunt Racing, will get another opportunity to compete for Sam Hunt Racing. He will hopefully have a good run. I think he had struggles the last time he raced a couple weekends ago at Bristol, I think it was. Hopefully Derek will be able to have a good run in the 26 car and help the team in the owner's points as well. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Williams. As reported by Casey Campbell, that Josh Williams, according to the NASCAR roster portal, he is going to drive a 78 for Live Fast Motorsports next weekend at the Charlotte Roval. Now, what's really interesting is that Josh Williams is really no longer at this point driver for BH McLeod Motorsports. So I find that very, very interesting. But I think it's a good opportunity for Josh Williams. I think Josh is a really talented driver who I think will get a good run in this car. I really trust that he will have a very solid run, and I expect a pretty good run from him in that 78 car, potentially a top 30 run in the 78 car. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Parker Kligerman. As Parker Kligerman is going to drive the 48 for Big Machine Racing this weekend at Talladega. Of course, Parker Kligerman has won 2 races in the Camping World Truck Series at Talladega. He's got 3 career Camping World Truck Series victories, 2 of those coming at Talladega. Parker, I think, has a really good opportunity and a really good chance to win this weekend, especially if them having RCR power and seeing how fast they've been, even though it's unclear if we'll have practice and qualify or not with the hurricane going on at the moment. I do think that Parker is going to have a really good shot, though, to get it done this weekend, and I expect him to be really, really fast this weekend at Talladega. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Trevor Bayne. As Trevor Bayne is back, and he's going to drive the 18th for Joe Gibbs Racing this weekend at Talladega. Originally, Drew Dollar was going to be driving his 18 car, but things have changed, and Trevor Bayne is getting behind the wheel. Trevor will be a threat to win. Trevor's been really fast in the 18 car this year. I think, besides maybe a couple other drivers, I think he's been the best driver in that 18 car. I really hope he goes full-time with Joe Gibbs Racing next year. But I think Trevor will have a very, very strong run in this car this weekend. I think he'll have a really good shot to get it done, and I'm very excited to see that Trevor Bayne is back in the Xfinity Series field this weekend at Talladega. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Jeffrey Earnhardt and Joey Gase. As there's been some changes for both of the drivers this weekend when it comes to what team they'll be running for. So originally, Jeffrey Earnhardt was going to drive the 53 car, but because the 53 car for Emily Gase Motorsports has withdrawn from this weekend, we're going to see Jeffrey Earnhardt drive the 35 car this weekend, and Joey Gase is going to be moving over to drive the 5 for BJ McLeod Motorsports this weekend, while Matt Mills will be moving over to drive the 78 car this weekend. Good to see Jeffrey's going to be racing. A lot of people wanted that 3 car to return this weekend. I know it probably was only a one-off deal to run that car. But I think a lot of people really wanted Jeffrey Earnhardt to come back and race in this series. So it is good to see that Jeffrey's going to get to, regardless, race this weekend. It's a shame he can't run full time with a really good organization like the team. And then Joey Gase gets to also race as well, gets to own a team and race against his own organization as well. I think that's really good to see and exciting to see that both drivers will still be able to get to race this weekend at Talladega. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about withdrawals from this weekend at Talladega. Now, due to the hurricane that is going up across the country now, that being Hurricane Ian that's hitting Florida right now, a bunch of teams have withdrawn from this weekend. Of course, I already talked about the 53 car, but Joe Nemechek, who was originally going to run the Xfinity Series race in the number 24 car, he will not be racing this weekend as the team has withdrawn from the event. Corey Roper, who I believe is attempting to make his first start since I think the beginning of the year at Daytona, he will not be racing in the 04 truck this weekend. And Ronnie Bassett Jr. in the 7017 for Bassett Racing, they also will not be racing this weekend and have withdrawn as well. It's tough to see a bunch of teams withdrawn. A lot of teams have already withdrawn from this weekend and are not entering. A lot of people thought NY Racing was going to make some starts this weekend. That is not happening, unfortunately, this weekend. And it's very disappointing to see that a lot of teams are going out and withdrawing from the event. But again, it isn't a major shock and a major surprise to me that teams are going ahead and withdrawing from these races. It's not a major shock, and it really is disappointing to see, but it's not a major shock to see a lot of teams withdrawing from this event, especially with the hurricane going up across the country. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Brandon Brown. Now, a good friend of mine is also a reporter, Casey Campbell, reported he had Brandon Brown on his podcast, and he reported on Twitter, and he reports that he confirmed for Brandon Brown that Brandon Brown will not return to Brandon-Built Motorsports in 2023. He also noted that he is going to finish the season with BJ McLeod Motorsports. This is a major tough break. This is going to be Brandon Brown's last start will be this weekend at Talladega, and they're probably going to have somebody else driving the organization. Now, a lot of people are really, really confused to why Brandon Brown won't be driving for Brandon-Built Motorsports, because a lot of people think that Brandon Brown owns the organization. Well, Brandon Brown does not own the organization. His father, Jerry Brown, owns the organization of Brandon-Built Motorsports. What happened a couple years ago with the Let's Go Brandon situation, all that stuff, I think really has affected Brandon Brown and really his career. And something that was out of his control has really affected him. So it's a major tough break for him. I think Brandon will be able to find a ride going into next year. A good team, I think, will pick up a driver like Brandon, because I think a lot of people see how good Brandon is as a driver. And I really hope a good team and organization decides to pick Brandon up. It's so unfortunate to see that Brandon Brown is basically gotten kind of screwed over because of the LGB situation, but hopefully he gets an opportunity to find a ride to go into in 2023, because he really deserves an opportunity, and hopefully he'll be full-time with a great organization heading into 2023. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Team Penske. As Team Penske originally was going to appeal the penalties that they had received from the past week, but they have decided to withdraw their penalty, which means that all the crew members that were suspended, including Jonathan Hassert, are going to miss Talladega, the Charlotte Roval, Las Vegas, and Homestead. Miles Stanley, who's been an engineer this year for Harrison-Burton, he is going to end up being taken over the crew chiefing duties for Ryan Blaney. Again, they were not going to win the appeal anyways, that they were basically trying to appeal the lug nut suspensions where the tire came off, but a tire clearly came off. We haven't seen as many of those tire issues so far throughout this year. But I think that it's good that they've withdrawn from their penalties. They weren't going to win the appeal anyways, and I think it's a good call. They have gone ahead and decided to go ahead and withdraw their penalties, because like I just mentioned here, there was no way in any shape or form they were going to win their appeal. So I think it's a good call. It is a really, really good decision in my honest opinion, and I'm very happy to see that they have gone ahead and gone and basically decided, you know what, we're going to go ahead and drop the penalties because we know we're not going to win the appeal. So good decision from them in my honest opinion, and happy to see that they've gone ahead and withdrawn the appeals that they had received. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about F1 sprint races. Now, something that's very unpopular in Formula 1, there's going to be a lot of stuff that's coming from Formula 1 that they're trying to change to speed up the process of racing to make the show better. Well, once again in 2023, there's going to be more sprint races heading into 2023. There are going to be 6 sprint races in 2023. That is up from 3 sprint races this year. Sprint races are not very popular. I think people know I'm not a big fan of some sprint races are good, but a lot of people are not big fans of sprint races to determine the field. You get half points for winning those events. I think you only get, actually, I think only the top 3 or 4 get points in those events. I understand what Formula 1 is trying to do to make the show a lot better, but man, it's very controversial. A lot of people are not going to like this move. I don't hate the move, don't get me wrong, but it's going to be very unpopular with the fans, and I will not be surprised if a lot of fans do maybe protest because of the sprint race debacle. But it is what it is, and it's their decision if they want to do it. It's their call. I just think it's a very controversial call to go ahead and do that, but it is what it is, and they're going to do what they need to do to make the show better. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Shogun. As it was announced yesterday that Shogun will be returning to the Alfa Romeo Orland team in 2023. Shogun, who is the first Chinese driver to race in Formula 1, did have some pretty impressive runs with the Alfa Romeo organization. I will say this is a good decision from the team, considering I do think, like I said, Shogun has had some really strong runs with the team this year. Is it controversial? Yes, because I think there's other drivers that do deserve the opportunity, but when you have a driver like Valtteri Bottas and Shogun, it makes sense to keep him in the team. You look at the solid performance the show has had. He scored some points this year, and it's helped both drivers score some points this year. And I've seen Joe have some pretty solid performances where he's contended for some top 10s, and he's had some pretty good runs. So I think he absolutely deserves this opportunity to continue driving for the team. I think it's a good decision. It's a really, really good call, in my opinion. Again, I think personally it's a really good decision to keep him in the team. He's had really good runs with the team this year, and in my honest opinion, he absolutely deserves to continue to drive for the team heading into 2023. Great decision, in my opinion, and happy to see that Shogun will continue driving for Alfa Romeo heading to 2023. Great decision, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Texas TV ratings from this past weekend. It was reported by Austin Karp, who works at Sports Business Journal, that according to him, that USA averaged 1.908 million viewers for the Cup race at Texas. This is down from a 2.095 million from a race at Las Vegas last year, and also down from 2.4 million from the last Texas race, though that one took out in October on NBCSN. We have seen the playoffs struggle in TV ratings this year. And I think a big reason is I think a lot of people are burnt out by it, but I also think that one of the biggest things is the lack of promotion. NBC has done a terrible job promoting these races, and they're not doing a really good job promoting. Now, the good news is for NBC is the fact that we're going to see the rest of the races on NBC. That needs to be noted, that the rest of the races from here on out are going to be on NBC. But what NBC needs to start doing is they need to start promoting these races a lot better. But also, I think the playoffs are a major factor. People, in my opinion, are getting really tired of the playoffs, and I think people just do not want these playoff formats anymore going forward. So they really want the playoff format to really, really go away, which makes a lot of sense, right? People don't like the playoffs. I think a lot of people have been outspoken. I personally think they need to change up the playoffs or just get rid of it entirely, but I don't think that's going to be a thing that's going to change. I also think with the NFL season, you can't have the season going on as long as it is and expect people to continue watching, especially the casuals, who are more likely going to go watch NFL than they're going to watch NASCAR. So I think things do have to change going into the next TV deal where we start having double headers and we start shortening the season a little bit, so we're not going into the NFL season because it has not worked for NASCAR and it needs to be fixed going forward, in my opinion. They absolutely need to try to go ahead and end this season a little bit earlier, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the 2023 IndyCar schedule that was revealed. And let's be honest, there's not a ton of changes that are going on with this next year's IndyCar schedule. So the season is going to kick off at St. Pete on March 5th, followed by Texas on April the 2nd. Long Beach is going to take place on April 16th, and they'll be racing at Barber on April 30th. They'll be racing at the Indianapolis Road Course on May the 13th, and then the Indy 500 is going to take place on May 28th, with qualifying taking place in between that for the Indy 500. Then, for the first time in a long time, we'll be racing on the actual streets of Detroit on June the 4th. Then we'll go to Road America on June 18th, and then we'll go to Mid-Ohio on July 2nd for the 4th of July weekend. Then we'll be racing at Toronto on July the 16th. Then we'll be racing at Iowa for both the doubleheader races on July 22nd and 23rd. Then we'll be racing in Nashville on August the 6th, followed by the Indy Road Course on August the 12th on Saturday, which will be on USA Network. Then we'll be racing on Worldwide Technology Raceway on a Sunday afternoon on August the 20th. Then we're racing at Portland on September the 3rd, and in Laguna Seca on September the 10th. So really the only major change is Worldwide Technology is going to be on NBC, while Laguna Seca is going to be on, not Laguna Seca, the Indy Road Course race is going to be on USA Network, which is definitely really, really shocking and really interesting, to say the least. And then, of course, there's Streets of Detroit. Other than that, though, there's not a lot of major changes to the IndyCar schedule, and I think IndyCar in the future, they're going to have to stop being stagnant, and they're going to have to make some changes to help them promote the series long term. But I don't know if they're going to do that. I don't know if they're going to continue trying to promote the series. But personally, I think that IndyCar needs to stop being stagnant with some of the changes that they are doing, and they need to go ahead and make some major moves long term in upcoming deals. But that is the 2023 IndyCar schedule. Not many changes, but there are a few changes for the 2023 schedule. But again, the least amount of changes noted by Jonathan Field, that this is the least amount of changes to an IndyCar schedule since 2000. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Cody Ware. As Cody Ware was on Sirius 7 NASCAR radio talking to Daniel Trotta and Larry McReynolds, and he provided an update in regards to his condition. He says that basically he has some ankles, he's bruised, and has some ligaments that are basically a little injured at the moment, but he says he expects to race at Talladega. For those who are unaware, Cody Ware suffered one of the nastiest wrecks we have seen in a very, very long time. There was inboard car camera that basically came out recently, and it showed he hit the outside wall extremely hard and then came back to the inside wall and hit the wall really, really hard. He was transported over to the infield care center. They had to load him into a stretcher and was transported into the infield care center. Now, Cody Ware, like I said, he expects he'll be racing this weekend at Talladega. Dortmund McClure actually noted this on their podcast as well, that basically he hit the outside wall so hard that he basically broke the wall and distorted the safe. I think he broke the safer barrier and distorted the wall as well. Major, major crash right there. It's good to see that Cody Ware is okay. And again, this next-gen safety has to be taken seriously a lot more going forward. It's good, though, that Cody Ware is all at least somewhat okay, saying he's a little bit bruised up and sore from the wrecks that he's seen, but he says he is expected to race. Good to see that for sure, and good to see that Cody Ware will be able to race despite the injuries that he did suffer there. It's good to see that he will at least be able to go out ahead and go and race this weekend at Talladega, but he has to, of course, be medically cleared to race, but he's expected to be medically cleared to race this weekend at Talladega. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. It was basically confirmed yesterday by Adam Stern that Shane Van Gisbergen has had early talks about making a debut in NASCAR with Trackhouse Racing. Now, we kind of talked about this on the channel on Monday morning, but Shane Van Gisbergen has shown some interest in now racing in NASCAR. Of course, Shane Van Gisbergen currently races in the Repco Supercar Series, where he's went on to win championships and win races as well. Shane is a very, very talented driver who I've been really high on him as a driver. I think he's a really, really solid driver, and a driver I think that would do very solid with Trackhouse Racing. Supercars are kind of a little bit similar to NASCAR Cup Series cars, just a little bit. So I think he'd be able to get behind the wheel and do a really, really good job. Plus, Trackhouse Racing is a really, really fast organization. The Project 91 car was really quick with Kimi Räikkönen, and they were showing top 10 and top 15 competitive speeds. It's not as fast, of course, the two main Trackhouse cars, but they've got Darian Grubb crew chiefing. Darian has a lot of engineering experience, so he knows what he's doing as a crew chief as well. And we've seen a lot more drivers interested in this Project 91 car as well. We'll talk about another driver who more than likely, if he does the double next year, he will be driving this car here in just a short little bit. But I really love to see that Shane Van Gisbergen is interested, and it's good to see that this Project 91 car has attracted so many drivers in other motorsports. Jenson Button is another one that comes to mind. Marcus Ericsson is very interested. Julio Castroneves is another one that's shown some interest in this car. And I really do believe in my heart that we are going to see at some point Shane Van Gisbergen race. It all will depend on when the Repco Supercars Championship schedule does end up getting officially revealed. But it will be awesome to see him get behind the wheel, and it's good to see that a driver like him is coming. And hope we can. What I would love to see is that this Project 91 car runs more than a few races next year and runs the whole entire season. I know the plans only run 6-8 races next year, but I think it would be really awesome if this car was able to run more than a few races next year. I think it'd be fun for sure, and hopefully we are going to see Shane Van Gisbergen get an opportunity to race a couple more than just one race next year. But it sounds like right now he's only going to run one race in 2023. That's what it looks like currently, and hopefully he will get that opportunity to race at least a couple times, but it sounds like right now only one race is on the options for him heading into 2023 with Trackhouse. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, we'll talk about Jimmie Johnson here in a little bit in this episode, but Jenna Fryer noted this on Monday afternoon when it was announced that Jimmie Johnson will be retiring from full-time racing. And she knows that if Kyle Busch is to do the Indianapolis 500 with Arrow McLaren SP with Menards as a sponsor, he will be also doing the double as well. Of course, Kyle Busch will be joining Retslap Racing next year to drive the A car, and Kyle Busch has had a lot of interest to race in the Indianapolis 500 for the last couple of years. In fact, he actually attempted to go run the Indy 500, was actually on the verge of going to run the Indy 500 in 2017, but Joe Gibbs did not budge. Now, he was cleared to do that a couple years later, but by that point, he was on his way out at Joe Gibbs Racing. Kyle Busch running the double is going to be something that a lot of drivers have not done. The last time the double, I believe, was completed was either 2001 or 2002. I think it was 2001 because Tony Stewart did the double, which a lot of drivers have attempted the double, and it's not really worked out for them where they've been able to complete every single lap. Tony Stewart was able to do that. Kyle Busch, of course, I think will be able to compete for both of the victories. Retslap Racing this year in 2022, especially with that A-team, especially picking up the most recent win at Texas Motor Speedway. We saw how fast Reddick has been in that car, and I'll be honest, I think Kyle Busch is a better driver than Tyler Reddick, and that's no disrespect to Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick's only the second driver this year to get more than 2 victories this year. People expected to win a couple of races this year, and he got 3 wins so far this year in that car. I think Kyle Busch will do better in that car. I think the A car is better than the 18 right now. And I really do believe that Kyle Busch will be a major, major threat to go out there and win the Indy 500 as well with Arrow McLaren SP. Kurt Busch, his brother, basically, who we'll be talking about here a little bit as well, he basically went out and did it, basically ran for Andretti and got 7th in his first, 6th or 7th in his first start with the team. So I really think that Kyle Busch will absolutely be a major threat to go out there and win in that car. I think Kyle Busch is absolutely going to have a shot to win the Indy 500 next year if he runs it. It sounds like it's a really good chance it's going to happen. I think it will happen. I think it'll be a threat to win it, and it will be awesome to see Kyle Busch race in the Indianapolis 500 in 2023. And when he does run it, I think it'll be really, really awesome, really, really cool, and hopefully we'll see him in the Indy 500 next year. It'd be really awesome for sure. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about a little bit more updates in regards to Junior Motorsports. Now, we talked about this on the channel on Monday, but it sounds like Junior Motorsports is not out of the realm of possibility of them going cup racing. Well, at the media center this past weekend at Texas Motor Speedway, Dale Jr. was being asked questions by the media, which included Nathan Solomon and Matt Weaver. And they both posted videos in regards to Dale Jr. talking about an insight on the team. He says it's still 50-50 for Junior Motorsports to still make a jump up to the Cup Series, but he says that the team feels closer than ever to making a decision if they're going to go Cup racing or not. I think things have changed in the last week, and I'll explain why I think things have changed. One of the biggest things that's probably helped change the narrative if they're going to jump up to Cup or not is the hiring of Brandon Jones. Brandon Jones will be driving the 9 car for Junior Motorsports next year, and what does Brandon Jones bring? Sponsorship and funding from Menards. The team, I think if they're going to make the jump up, they're going to need sponsorship and funding. And Brandon Jones provides a lot of that sponsorship funding that is going to be needed. Is Brandon Jones the greatest driver in the world? And would he be my first choice to get behind the wheel of a Cup car? No, absolutely not. I think there's better choices to get behind the wheel, like a Josh Berry or Sam Mayer or even Justin Allgaier, perhaps, because Justin Allgaier does have that brand sponsorship and funding, right? Well, I think that if they are going to make the jump, I think Brandon Jones is going to be the key driver. I think Brandon Jones is a very solid driver. He's done good things in Xfinity in this year. He's gotten a win this year. He's gotten 5 Xfinity Series victories, which are not a bad driver, by the way, if you get 5 wins. And is he a paid driver? Yeah, he's got sponsorship funding, which is why he's being hired by the team. But he's probably also being hired by the team because of his experience. He's got experience in Xfinity. He's been there for a very, very long time. And I think he absolutely will win more races in the 9 car than the 19 car, depending on who his crew chief is. If he's got Luke Lambert next year, I think it'll be more of a championship threat. But I think there's a good chance Luke Lambert's going to go to the Cup next year with no Grayson being the crew chief there. But that being said, it will be so cool to see Junior Motorsports make the jump when they do. Because, again, I think when Junior Motorsports does make the jump up the Cup, whether that's 2023 or 2024, whatever it is, I do think the team is going to be extremely competitive. They're probably going to have to drop Rick Hendrick off the ownership stake, which I don't think is going to be that hard to do. But I really think that when it comes to Junior Motorsports making the jump up, I think it's sounding more likely that it could happen in the not-so-distant future. And whenever they do, I think it'll be really great for the sport. But whenever it happens, we'll definitely cover that story for sure. That'll be a massive story. And when they do make the jump up the cup, it will be really, really exciting. And I do hope that Junior Motorsports does make the jump up the cup in the not-so-distant future, which could be a video that might be up on the channel tomorrow. So keep your notifications up for that. But I definitely think it'll be cool when Junior Motorsports does make the jump, and I hope they do make the jump in the not-so-distant future. I think it'll be really good for the sport, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Jimmie Johnson. Now, we've already talked about Jimmie Johnson in regards to him retiring, but Jimmie Johnson provided some more insight in regards to that. And there's a lot of stuff revolving around Jimmie Johnson we'll talk about in this section of the video. But Jimmie Johnson was being interviewed by Bob Pockers and multiple media members, and Jimmie Johnson's basically confirmed that he is not under contract with any manufacturer currently at the moment. Now, Jimmie Johnson, of course, in this year, 2022, he was with GM for the Allied team, the 48 team in IMSA, which is a Chevy-based team, which is a GM-backed team. But in IndyCar, he was full-time at Honda with Chip Ganassi Racing. So Jimmie Johnson can run with whatever manufacturer he wants to. Now, Jimmie Johnson, of course, we already talked about it. He is going to be retiring at the end of this year from full-time competition. But Jimmie Johnson is in talks to do multiple one-off races. What are those races specifically? Number one, he would love to run the Garage 56 entry in the Le Mans 24 Hours next year. And Jimmie Johnson in the past has shown interest in doing that. Jimmie Johnson has also shown interest in running the double, running the Indianapolis 500 and racing in NASCAR as well for the Coca-Cola 600. Now, if Jimmie Johnson does enter both those races, what teams are he going to run for? Number one, he will run in IndyCar. He'll run for Chip Ganassi Racing. I think that's the only team he's going to run for, considering that Chip Ganassi does have a little bit of partnership with Justin Marks, considering Justin Marks sold the team. I really to Chip Ganassi basically got the team sold to him. Chip Ganassi sold the team to Justin Marks. I think Jimmie Johnson easily will be with Chip Ganassi in the 48 car just for the Indy 500. But then the Coke 600, he'll drive the Project 91 car. I expect that is going to be where he'll run it. Now, Jimmie Johnson also has noted that he could run a couple more races in NASCAR, could run the All-Star race in North Wilkesboro, and also he could, if he wants to, he could run maybe at the Chicago Street Course. He's been open to running a couple races next year. But he's very limited. He has kind of a limit that he wants to run next year. He wants to run only about 10 races next year to spend more time with his family. Jimmie Johnson has earned the right to retire. He's done so much for motorsports over the years, and he's been in the motorsports industry for such a long time that he absolutely is in a good position if he wants to retire. Now, he absolutely has the right to go ahead and retire. Is it disappointing he's retiring? Yeah, absolutely, for sure. It is disappointing that he's going ahead and retiring. But I really think when it comes to Jimmie Johnson, he's a great driver for sure. He deserves everything. I know, and basically didn't really care and decided, you know what, I'm going to go out there and race IndyCar. Had a lot of fun with it and absolutely deserves a retirement with everything he's been able to accomplish in the sport for sure and the racing world. But it would be definitely cool if he runs next year in NASCAR and does the double. I think it would be fun. Not a lot of drivers attempted to double. I think it would be really cool next year if you had Jimmie Johnson, Kyle Busch, and Kyle Larson also run it. Because Kyle Larson's also had conversation in the past that he would love to run in the Indianapolis 500 as well. He's had conversations about doing that where he wants to run Indy 500, but he has to basically get approved and it has to be announced here in the not-so-distant future if he is going to do that. That being said, though, it's good to see that Jimmie Johnson is still a little bit interested in racing, but if retiring full-time competition is not a shock and surprise to me, and it's good to see that Jimmie is kind of really wanting to focus on his personal life and his personal endeavors. But I think it's good that he's talking about that and good to see that for sure, that he still wants to race, but also wants to spend more time with his family. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Kurt Busch. Now, Kurt Busch at the thing that was going on at Charlotte this past week, the pink thing, the breast cancer pink thing that they were doing out at Charlotte Roval, he was asked a lot of questions and provided an update on his health. And Kurt Busch said that he's hoping to make a return to NASCAR by the end of this year. He's hoping to make some starts in NASCAR. Talked about how he's been kind of proceeding. He says he's feeling better each and every day, and he is hoping to make a return to NASCAR in the not-so-distant future. Kurt Busch has been sitting out for the last 10 or 11 weeks due to having concussion protocols and has been trying to make a return to NASCAR this year, but unfortunately, this has not been able to make a return up to this point. We, of course, talked about this. That Denny Hamlin said that they're hoping to get an update here in the not-so-distant future on Kurt Busch. Well, this is kind of a little bit of an update that Kurt Busch really wants to return. Obviously, I believe Kurt Busch wants to also return and finish up his career team. I still personally believe that this upcoming season, 2023, is going to be last year for Kurt. But there is also a backup plan just in case if Kurt Busch is not able to return. That, of course, is John Hunter Nemechek. John Hunter Nemechek, who's basically still part of the TRD group. There's a lot of talk that he's going to be out of KBM because Kyle Busch Motorsports are going to be switching over to Chevy next year. And John Hunter's going to need a ride next year, but it's sounding a little bit more likely that they could move him over to Joe Gibbs Racing Xfinity Series program. But going back to Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch has been out for a very, very long time. He's been out for 10 or 11 weeks. Now, I understand that Kurt Busch does want to return in 2022. And trust me, I would love for Kurt Busch to return. But I think just for Kurt Busch's sake, I personally believe, and this is my opinion, I believe Kurt Busch should just sit out for the rest of this season and focus on getting better so he can be more prepared for next year. Because what if Kurt Busch does come back this year and crashes out again and gets involved in another wreck? That could cause more issues with concussions. It really, really could. I think if I'm Kurt Busch, I'm sitting out for the rest of the year. I understand he wants to come back. He wants to return. And trust me, I think it'll be awesome for Kurt Busch to make a return this year. I'd love for him to come back. And trust me, I want him to come back. But I also would, for his health and safety, I just wouldn't risk coming back this year. Now, obviously, if Kurt Busch does make a return this year to finish this year, he will be in the 23 car. He won't be in the 45 car as Bubba's going to finish here in the 45 car. Kurt will be in the 23 car if that happens, which we'll talk about why probably that honestly should happen at this point where someone else takes that 23 car. But obviously, when it gets to talking about, the situation for Kurt, I think, really wants to be back racing. And Kurt has been at the racetrack. He's been at the shop. He's been trying to get prepared. And he's been having a lot of good help from doctors. And these are the same doctors that Dale Jr. had in 2012 when Dale Jr., he had his concussion issues. And concussion is something that can just flare up. They can be gone one day. The next day, they just can absolutely come back. And sometimes it can flare up, and he could have more issues where he's sitting out for more races. And that's why I'm a little nervous about him coming back this year personally. I'm just a little nervous about Kurt making a return this season. Now, going into next year, yeah, absolutely make a return. You've got to have a few more months to basically heal up and recover, and you won't have potential problems of recovery. Now, if he does have to go test a next-gen car, that could be an issue where he wrecks, and then we see more issues pop up right there. But that being said, I think if I'm Kurt Busch, if I'm in the position of Kurt Busch, I would go ahead and sit out for the rest of the season and just not come back the rest of the year. I know that Kurt wants to come back, and trust me, I would love for Kurt Busch to come back, and I would love for him to come back. Trust me, I think Kurt Busch coming back would absolutely be phenomenal and would be really, really good to see him make a return. But I just think for Kurt Busch, I think he needs, again, personally, I think he needs to sit out for the rest of the year, take some time off, and then make a return next year full-time in that 45 car. But I also think that if he does return next year, I think it is going to be his final year in the NASCAR Cup Series. Because, like I said, Kurt Busch is getting a lot older as a driver. He's 44, turned 44 years old just earlier this year. He'll be 45 at the end of 2023. And Kurt Busch still will be, again, he does have an option for 2024 as well. But I think next year will be his last year in Cup as well. But if I'm in Kurt Busch's position, I am sitting out for the rest of the year and then making a return in 2023. But if he does return this year, fair play to him. And it would be awesome for him to return. Trust me. I'd love for Kurt Busch to return. And I hope he does. But honestly, I don't know if he's going to come back. And it'd be awesome for him to come back. But we'll see what happens. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about William Byron and Ty Gibbs, as both drivers have been handed major penalties. William Byron has been handed a 25-point penalty and also has been fined $50,000. Ty Gibbs, he has been fined $75,000, and the team has lost 25 owners' points as well. Let's talk about the issues and why they have been penalized. Let's first begin with William Byron. William Byron, under caution, there was contact between him and Denny Hamlin down the backstretch on one of the restarts with around 72 laps to go in the race. Now, there actually wasn't really contact. Denny Hamlin forced William Byron wide, and William Byron got into the outside wall, and William Byron was not very happy. Under the caution flag, William Byron turn into the back of Denny Hamlin and turn him into the infield under caution up on speed. NASCAR did not get the positions back to Denny Hamlin, and Denny Hamlin and his crew chief were ruthlessly saying that he needs to be sent to the rear of the field and he needs to be penalized for this and needs to be sent to the rear of the field, which I agree they should have penalized him at that time. But they did not, and Hamlin basically had to start in the mid-pack, and William basically kind of admitted, but not really admitted in per to say. Should clarify that in my tweet from earlier yesterday. Basically, that he didn't really admit to the issues, but he did basically do the stuff. Now, Hendrick Motorsports, they're going to appeal the penalties, which I'm a little shocked that they're going to appeal these penalties, considering that they basically kind of admitted that he turned them, and he literally turned them under caution. I don't understand why they're going to appeal. They're not going to win the appeal. I guess maybe to try to get the points back, or maybe get the appeal dropped down a little bit. Now, because of William Byron's penalties, he drops from being 17 points above to being 8 points below. Now, obviously, William Byron, I think, has got a good shot to get those points back. Hendrick's been really good at the Roval in the past, and I think Byron will get some stage points at Talladega, but that puts him in a little bit of a hole going into this weekend at Talladega. Now we get to the other penalty, and the one I think that is a little more egregious. Talking about Ty Gibbs. There's a lot of stuff around Ty Gibbs we're going to talk about here in this section, but Ty Gibbs was fine because he did something really, really egregious on pit road. Ty Gibbs and Ty Dillon had contact on pit road, and this really wasn't picked up by the broadcast as much, but Ty Gibbs literally got mad after Ty Dillon unintentionally got into Ty Gibbs, and Ty Gibbs basically just shucks him to the left and puts Ty Dillon almost into officials and crew members. That is extremely dangerous, and that is unacceptable, and that's why Ty Gibbs absolutely deserves these penalties. And absolutely, we'll talk about thoughts on some of the stuff that Ty Gibbs did to this race, but you should know better, Ty. You absolutely should know better and not cause harm to others on pit road. That's extremely dangerous, that's ridiculous, and you should absolutely know better. Now, Ty Gibbs apologized on Twitter right after the penalties. And let me just say this when it comes to this apology. This apology is not the greatest apology in the world, and he says he should learn better. Ty, you should apologize the day of the incident. Should have absolutely apologized. You can't just wait 2 days after an incident to go ahead and apologize. And let's also not forget that this is the second time Ty Gibbs has been penalized this year. People forget about the Sam Mayer and Ty Gibbs incident in Martinsville, where basically an official got brought to the ground. Sam Mayer, he apologized. I think he apologized the night of the incident. Ty Gibbs did not apologize. Ty Gibbs should apologize on the day of the incident and not waiting. And then later in the evening, and basically Eric Jones, he also responded, and Ty Gibbs literally hit Eric Jones under caution. There's a video of evidence came out, I think it was from Black Sabbath, or can't remember the guy's name exactly, but basically, he put out a tweet showing inboard car camera, showing that Ty Gibbs literally hit him under caution. Why? What is Ty doing here? And Ty knows better. I understand that Ty has shown, and look, I will say this about Ty. Ty Gibbs has shown some maturity this year, improving maturity to the media. This is taking a major step backwards. He absolutely knows better not somebody under caution. You don't hit cars on pit road. It's unacceptable and deserves these penalties. I don't care about your apology. You know better as a driver. That is an unwritten rule. You should absolutely know better. And if you're going to be going to Cup next year, you cannot be making these kind of mistakes. These are unacceptable and unforgivable. So I'm glad NASCAR stepped in and penalized. But now I want to talk about something else too, and it's on NASCAR. This stuff should have been officiated throughout the race. And Dale Jr. even quoted this morning on SiriusXM. He basically said that he is shocked that someone up in that officiating booth didn't catch this. How is it that us fans are catching these mistakes on TV, and even NBC's catching these mistakes, but the people officiating races, how are they not catching these penalties? I just do not understand how they're not catching this. This stuff we should not be waiting until Tuesday to get officiated. This is stuff that should absolutely be officiated throughout the race. And maybe you should send some penalties out after, of course. But this is stuff that should be officiated throughout the race. How is it that it's taking us fans to find this kind of stuff and post it on Twitter? We should not have more us fans. We love the access we get. We should not have more access than the officials have. The fact that the fans are finding out more stuff and doing a better job finding this stuff than officials are is absolutely ridiculous and absurd in my opinion. But going back to the penalties, they're absolutely justified. I think penalties are absolutely justified. You can't do some of the stuff these drivers did and not get penalties for that. And I think it's said best. Eric Jones basically is mad at Ty Gibbs, and Ty Gibbs is going to have a lot of learning going next year because he's going to go to Cup next year. Ty Gibbs, He's a great driver, absolutely. But there are things that he's going to have to learn as a driver in this series. He's going to have to learn that there's things that you can and cannot do. And the thing that Ty Gibbs did on pit road, he knows better than that. That's frowned upon. And I think Ty Gibbs will learn that at some point, right? I think he'll learn. But he's 20 years old. He should know better. And there's things that Ty Gibbs has got to do. And controlling your temper is one of your things. You got to control that temper. I understand he's young. And people say, well, he needs to learn. He's young. He's going to learn. It's like, he will learn eventually. Yes, I think he's going to learn. I think he'll be loved eventually. But he's got to learn to control that temper. He's shown so much improvement this year. It takes major steps backwards this year. He's taking major steps backwards. He's got to learn. He's got to absolutely learn to control that temper that he's had. Because if he doesn't learn, it's going to be major issues. So I hope he learns long term, but the penalties are justified, in my opinion, for both drivers. And Hendrick appealing is kind of key, to my opinion, that they're appealing the penalties. But it is what it is, and these penalties are deserved, in my opinion. So that is the end of today's Long NASCAR and Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, notifications, so you can be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links in the description below for that. Comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about Ty Gibbs and William Byron getting the penalties? Do you think the penalties are justified or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories we discussed on today's episode, including the Kurt Busch story? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel, I think I'm going to do a video around Junior Motorsports and if they should jump up to the Cup Series or not. I think I'm going to do that tomorrow on the channel. Friday should be another NASCAR news video. We've got a lot of other content on the way as well that I think you all are going to enjoy throughout the weekend as we get you prepared for Talladega. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.